All right, everybody, it is 10:40. So let's go ahead and get started again. I am about to introduce the folks that are going to lead this morning workshop. We're super lucky to have them here. I'm not going to take up too much of their time, so I'm just going to introduce Michelle Medley Daniel. Can you turn on your screen there, Michelle? Yep, there she is.
Come on.
Um,
Hear me?
Yep, I can hear you and I can see you. Michelle is the director of the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. I hope I said that right, Michelle. She has a wealth of experience and information of how to really help organize and mobilize communities and also networks of larger communities throughout the entire US. So we're very happy to have her here. And so I am going to pass it over and then get the prompts going.
Awesome.
All right, Michelle.
Thanks so much,
Yep.
Christina. So we're really excited to be able to bring a workshop to you this morning. So this workshop is a partnership that the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network that I have the pleasure to work with, as well as the Firewise USA program that Megan Fitzgerald McGowan works with through NFPA, and some of the offerings that the International Association of Fire Chiefs that Jen Dietz is going to be representing. So we're all here to share a little bit about how our national programs can support folks that work in local places or at different scales take action to try to work on living better with fire. We have 3 different sort of sections to our workshop today. We're going to all talk about our programs a little bit, give you a little bit more background and detail about those. And then we're going to have a bunch of polls and try to get some information about you all and sort of what your work looks like, how you could, what support you could use. And then we have a really special treat. We're going to hear from 3 practitioners from around the country who have used the programs that are available nationally and hear about how those have impacted their work. So you can hear from some peers. So that's what's on deck for us today. And I want to get us started off. We're going to go back to that really cool polling tool that you heard about at the beginning of this workshop. If you're not already logged in, you can go to menti.com and the code is at the top of your screen. And our first prompt just today, just to warm us up and get you thinking about how your own work relates to the programs we're going to talk about, we'd like you to describe your relationship with fire in 3 words. So we'll start to see a really cool word cloud appearing as soon as folks log in there and start sharing those 3 words about your relationship with fire. Cool. I love these words about how our relationships with fire are intimate, educational, they involve leadership. The word beauty is on here, personal, powerful, fear. Keep on typing those in. I think it's really important for us all to reflect on our own experiences with fire and our own relationship with fire. If we truly want to live better with fire, we need to think about our own relationship with both fire, place, and our neighbors. And I think this is really where we can start grounding ourselves in that. Okay, thanks so much for participating in that one. We've got one more kind of warm up for you, and that, so I'll have Christina move on to the next one. This one is something I always like to ask people to reflect on. So, and I think that Jack's talk really helped prime the pump for this, as well as Mark's remarks earlier about kind of that vision for how Nevada can live better with fire. So describe the relationship you want your community to have with fire in the future. I think so often we get caught up in thinking about how many challenges we face, and it's really important to think about describing our goal. What is it that we want rather than just what we don't want? So we can see we've got a lot of ideas rolling up on the screen from you all here. Awareness to action, honest, realistic, adaptive, informed, educated, ready to take action, cooperative, harmonious, healthy, aware, accepting inevitability and responsibly preparing. These are great answers. I really encourage folks to reflect on that question. And if you work with partners, if you are a person who has the opportunity to inspire others, really dig into this and think about how to imagine in detail how your community could have a different relationship with fire. Okay, so we're going to have time for a few other polls, but I want to keep us as close to time as I can, because as you heard, we've got a lot of cool parts of our session. So I'm actually going to share my screen. And don't answer this question yet, because we're gonna get to that in just a second. But I'm gonna start by talking a little bit about the FAC framework and the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. And then you're gonna hear from Megan Fitzgerald McGowan about the FireWise program, and then from Jen Dietz about the programs that IFC has to offer. So let me get my screen share launched, and I'll share my screen. Okay, I think folks should be able to see my screen now. I wanted, like I said, to kind of kick us off with, what do we really mean when we say fire adapted communities? Mark set us up for this, talking about the cohesive strategy, so I'll be able to make up a little bit of time here, but I think it's really important that we ground ourselves in this information. You know, being fire adapted means that you are working toward a future where your relationship with fire is one of harmonious outcomes, where fire can play its role in the landscape, and where those kinds of human disasters that Jack described are reduced, where we've really taken the actions we can to limit the negative outcomes that fire can have for people. This also sort of grounding in our fire paradigm. Jack did a great job of giving us a ton of background on this, so I won't spend a long time, but I think I love this, this table from a Joint Fire Science review on futuring what our relationship with fire could be. And I think it's so helpful to sort of look at this and recognize the changes that we really need to make in both our institutions and our investments and our approaches to our relationship with fire, as well as our individual kind of orientation to fire. So I always like to share this and really think about how we move from this kind of war on fire to a paradigm where we can live more safely with fire. I really want to focus quite a bit of my time today on this graphic. We created this Fire Adapted Communities graphic to try to help explain the FAC framework. One of the kind of issues, and it was sort of brought up this morning by way of a question, is there's been a lot of work and evolution of programs designed to help address different aspects of fire issues. And there's been some confusion about the idea that Fire Adapted Communities was there to replace FireWise, or to replace some of the other programs that had been started and been supporting communities and taking action. And so we created this graphic to try to help explain that that is not the case. We're not trying to replace any of the existing programs and efforts out there, but rather that there are lots of different actions that communities and individuals can take to work on improving their wildfire resilience. And we wanted to try to start describing those and visually depicting them. So on this graphic, you can see we have a couple of different parts of this bullseye. We have the center ring, which are really kind of different sectors or themes of activities. And then in the outer ring, we have some specific actions. It's really important to understand that fire adaptation is going to look really different in every community. It's not a checklist. You can't go through a specific prescribed set of actions and all of a sudden become fire adapted. It's very complex. There's a lot of different layers of governance and culture and landscape reality that all go into what your community's relationship with fire is. And it's also dynamic and changing all the time. And so it's important, I think, to take a holistic view and think about how all of these components interact. So again, like I was saying, this graphic has a number of different components. This inner circle, it are broad categories or topical areas that make up the FAC framework. Some of these areas might be really important in your community and others might be less important in your community. And which ones are most important might change over time. One thing I love about seeing this sort of list of kind of prompter buckets in my mind is that you can use them as a way to kind of think about, well, how do landscape treatments play into my community's relationship with fire? You know, how is my community interfacing in terms of response? What are we doing in terms of our own mitigation? How have we heeded that science that Jack shared? What are we doing in terms of evacuation? Have we worked with our first responders and our safety organizations to make plans? And so I think you can sort of look at this and think of it as a menu of opportunities to improve resilience. And then this outer ring is where we have some specific actions that communities might take. This is not meant to be a comprehensive list. Neither that inner blue ring nor the outer ring are meant to be comprehensive. These are really just meant to prompt folks in really thinking about their community's relationship with fire and the kinds of actions they might take to improve that relationship. So I'll give you a specific example here. Every community is going to have a different kind of approach to dealing with each of these sort of topical areas. So for example, you might have a community who wants to think about safety and evacuation, and maybe that community is choosing to do that by incorporating the Ready, Set, Go program. Now, Ready, Set, Go is not just about evacuation. It is also about resident preparedness and being and ingress and egress routes. And so not everything doesn't fit tidily into one bucket, but it's there to sort of prompt folks and have them thinking about the tools that could be available for their toolbox. Let's take another example where most communities are engaged in some kind of resident or community mitigation work, most people who are working on fire adapted communities. So in some places, Firewise USA is the centerpiece of that effort, but in other communities, like Jack also mentioned in his answer, there are programs like the Wildfire Partners Program in Colorado, where they're working with homeowners to create a certification program rather than a recognition program. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there, whether they're programs or specific kind of concepts to help address these kind of themes of fire adaptation. Having a variety of excellent programs and tools is kind of the point of having this entire menu available to you. As I said, and I really want to reinforce, the most important thing is that your community, your neighbors, your partners, the folks who are thinking about your community's relationship with fire are looking at all of these aspects and thinking about what makes sense for us, what can we have a positive impact on, and how can we take action together. So speaking of those partners and community members, FACNet also created this graphic to help describe, we just talked about what fire adapted communities actions are. This graphic describes who is involved in fire adapted communities action. So what I really think is important about this graphic is that it shows all kinds of folks from different sectors. A lot of times people think about, fire and land managers and homeowners as the primary folks involved. And those folks all have an enormous opportunity to make a difference. But we also have folks who work in public health, who work in research, who work in local government or tribal government, and who work in business, who all have different opportunities to contribute to changing how your community works and lives with fire. Another thing that I think is important about this graphic is we really tried to stay away from defining the roles that different people should play. Different communities operate in different ways. I'm from a very small community where we don't have local government. So our nonprofit organizations often take that kind of role of being a convener and bringing partners together. So it's really important, I think, not to use this graphic to kind of pigeonhole partners, but rather to see it as these are all people who could contribute to your work. This graphic was made by our partners at the Washington Fire Adapted Communities Network, and I love it because it really helps illustrate that there is also, it's not just what you need to do and who needs to do it, but there's also action to take at all times. So often I think people think about adaptation work as stuff that happens purely with preparedness and mitigation work prior to a fire, but there are so many opportunities for communities to improve outcomes for themselves during a fire and also when they're in the recovery phases. I also want to point out that they specifically designed this as a cycle because it is not a linear experience. You're always before your next fire and after the fire that happened in your place previously. So we always have an opportunity to act. So I'm going to shift gears for my last couple of minutes here and talk a little bit about the National Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. So FACNet exists to support and connect practitioners who are working on community wildfire resilience. So, I just spent the first part of my talk kind of describing that framework of what is fire adapted communities and sort of describing that it can look really different depending on where you are and the specific partners you have. But one of the things we recognized before we started the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network is that it can be really isolating to be trying to work in your place. Maybe you're the only one using this language, or maybe you are just getting started in this work. And it can be really difficult to figure out what you should do and who can help you learn and improve your practices. And so we saw that it could be really powerful to try to answer this question of who inspires, assists, and supports you. And we wanted to answer that question by creating a network of people who folks could connect with across geographic boundaries to really move the best ideas rapidly around and help folks adopt the things that really work. When folks think about networks, I think often they think about back in pre-COVID days of hanging out in the lobby at a conference and collecting business cards, or maybe you think about your social networks like Facebook and Nextdoor. And these sort of informal networks are kind of like a Rolodex of who you are personally connected to. Those might be your physical neighbors, they might be an affinity group, they might be professional connections. And those networks are really important. They are pathways for information, support, and job prospects. And there's a lot of tools that can help support the maintenance of those connections. But the outcomes of those connections are really unpredictable. And so when I talk about the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, I'm not talking about sort of who else that works in fire. I'm talking about a very specifically designed network where we are working hard to design for certain kinds of outcomes and connections. So our FACNet is a formal peer learning network that places this sort of complex social issue of how to live better with fire, how to change our fire paradigm at the center of all of our connections. And members and organizations they work for connect to work through that topic together. There's a lot of research about how important peer networks are in terms of actually changing behavior. Peers are the people that we trust the most and that we learn from the best. And so it's a really useful tool in helping to change action. So FACNet got started in 2013 to support community leaders who are working across that range of categories I talked about in the framework. And we've learned so much from the people across the United States who are working on this. There are lots of great ideas, and you're going to hear about some of those in this afternoon's workshop when you hear from Becca Samolsky, who leads the FACO effort. But I always find myself being so inspired by the work that leaders like yourselves are doing in communities really across the US. We have members from all the way from the Pine Barrens in New Jersey to Austin, to the sort of urban area of Austin, Texas, and to close to where I live, with just a few hundred people in small mountain towns in Northern California. So the variety of work out there is matches the variety of our communities. And I think it's really awesome to be able to engage with other practitioners. So again, really quickly, just to outline what FACNet, how FACNet supports folks, we facilitate connections with peers, the science community, and agency personnel and decision makers. We have a bunch of tools for doing that, but really connecting people is at the heart of what we do. We want to connect those folks so they can learn together, so they can improve their activities, so that they can can take action that makes a difference. And we create a lot of resources to help support that learning, and we gather and share the learning directly from the ground. Our approach to this work is that the people who are actively doing this work on a daily basis are the experts. We certainly want to connect people with folks who have specialties and other expertise, but we don't approach this where we want to tell people what actions they should take. We really want to hear about what they're working on and then work together to solve problems and find solutions. I just want to touch really briefly on the fact that the network also, in that sort of sharing bucket of the third thing that we do, we like to elevate practitioner voices. So we have a weekly blog that features folks like yourselves out there in the audience who do this work. We have, I think, over 500 blogs on our website. So you can get a bunch of information about other people who do this work, what that work looks like, their best ideas. We have a bunch of articles that feature science, and there is just a wealth of information. So I definitely urge folks to check it out. We also have copies of those graphics that I was sharing, and resources to help if you're wanting to use those to help engage with folks in your community. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their time. I'm going to pass things over to my colleagues, but first I want to recognize our funders. The USDA Forest Service and the Department of the Interior fund FACTNet through a subaward with the Nature Conservancy to the Watershed Center, who I work for. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass things over to Megan Fitzgerald McGowan with the National Fire Protection Association.
Thank you, Michelle. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, I'm getting my stuff set up right now. I want to. All right. Well, hopefully you can all see my slides. Thank you again. My name is Megan, and I work for the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, in our wildfire division. For those of you who don't know, NFPA is a global self-funded nonprofit established in 1896, devoted to eliminating death, injury, and property and economic loss due to fire, electrical, and related hazards. Our wildfire division kind of addresses the same thing, but really is trying to get to helping to prevent the loss of life, homes, and property to wildfire. So we provide different resources to residents and key influencers to help ensure that everyone living at risk from wildfire has the information, knowledge, and tools to reduce that said risk. And we do this through a variety of ways. We have community engagement and mitigation focused programs, training and certification to help with, Jack mentioned that kind of subject matter expert practitioner piece. So we have some offerings there to help, and then educational outreach materials. And all of these are geared towards the end result on the ground, helping to address the residential fire program or problem, not program. The information that we share is all based on the home ignition zone concept that was, coined by Jack, and focuses on home materials and immediate surroundings that dictate the ignitability. What happens in this area is critical to structure survival, and that there are things that we can do. Along with the research done by Jack, we also partner with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, IBHS. They've continued a lot of that research. I think Jack showed a video of their embers that they're able to kind of fire at the home. So we have different resources I'll show at the end that we've partnered with them on that are all about helping the resident understand the different components of their home that may need to be addressed to help improve its chances of surviving a wildfire, and kind of then plays into the whole idea of neighbors working together because they influence each other. So that's a quick who I am, kind of what we offer and what it's all based on. It's based on science. Now to dive into our programs, and probably the most well-known one is FireWise USA. So FireWise USA is a national recognition program. We provide a framework to help residents get organized, find direction, and take action to increase the ignition resistance of homes and the community. The program itself started in 2002, And but really the conversation had been going on since the 1980s. NFPA's participated in kind of forums with the US Forest Service, the different organizations under the Department of the Interior, the National Association of State Foresters. And the whole thing was looking at how do we address this residential component where some of these federal agencies don't really cover. They are land management organizations. And so we are that partner to help address that. We are funded through a cooperative agreement with the USDA Forest Service, and still partner with those other organizations as well. We are currently active in 42 states with a 43rd on the way, and we have over 1,800 participants. I'll show a map later, but just to kind of give a sense of the program started very small. In 2002, I think our pilot had 12 sites, and now we have over 1,800. And a lot of that growth is due to the wildfires we've seen over the last few years and that loss and destruction that we've seen in communities. So one more thing, when we look at Firewise, again, it's not just one person, it's everyone working together. If you look at the home ignition zone and that idea of 30 to even 100 feet out from your house, you might find that you're in your neighbor's yard and their conditions are going to influence your home and vice versa. So the whole idea is that you work together. The steps to recognition: first, you need to get organized. So as a resident, you are going to need to obtain a wildfire risk assessment. And this should be a collaboration between you and a practitioner. It could be someone from your local forest office, your fire department, another nonprofit organization that assists with wildfire in your state. I'm sure as Nevada moves forward, Mark will kind of start to recognize and kind of designate who some of those partners are in this. You need to form a board or committee comprised of residents and those other stakeholders. And then you're going to identify what your community looks like. You have to have at least 8 homes and a max of 2,500. I encourage smaller because the bigger you get, the less participation we tend to see. And this is really the effectiveness of Firewise hinges on people participating and doing their part. From that assessment, you're going to make a plan, and this plan should cover, goals for the next 2 or 3 years. And really, when you're looking at it, it's starting small, working your way out. Again, I think Mark said it, it's start at your home and then look to see what you need to do further out. But, maybe the first year is everyone just has an assessment done of their own home to identify their risks. And then you start to say, okay, we all have a gutter problem. We need to make sure we're doing that annual maintenance work. And then you start to prioritize and take action on bigger projects. But if we know that the home in its immediate 0 to 5 foot space is the most impactful for preventing ignition, that's where the focus should start. You have to do things throughout the year. You have to host some educational outreach events, and this can be virtual, in person. In the time of COVID, folks have had to get creative. And then you have to meet the investments. You have to do work on the ground. And then you tell us about it on our portal. And you do all of this every year. It is a recognition program that in order to stay in, you have to do annual reporting. The investment is based on 1 hour of work per home in your community. If it's 100 homes, that's 100 hours. We're currently using the National Volunteer Rate of 2543. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I'm sure I'm taking too much time. All of this goes into the portal. So portal.firewise.org. It's where you can create your community and tell us all about it. Here's a quick overview of where we're at across the nation. So you see we have participation in all kinds of areas where wildfire might look different, but there's still that threat of homes living in those areas with conditions that could potentially raise a threat to them. So Alaska, Hawaii, the East Coast, the West Coast, and everywhere in between. Some other offerings from NFPA to help you get started on your wildfire journey. The first Saturday in May each year, we host Wildfire Community Preparedness Day. And this is really a call to action day, a rallying point. It might be your community's first foray into doing some sort of activity. Again, with traditionally people have hosted big events. With COVID this year, people got creative, and we don't know what the future might look like, but it could be you get 5 homes in your community to say, on this day, we're each going to spend 2 hours doing work. And it's a start because those small actions over time will make a difference. Looking at more of the kind of professional development, we have a 2-day class that has been on hold this year, but we're hoping to move forward again next year as hopefully conditions improve. That's all about teaching the practitioners out there who are engaging with residents, the science behind home ignition, and how to do that assessment, how to provide those appropriate recommendations. So we're really focusing on addressing that residential problem and getting homes to the point where they don't ignite. We're also very excited to say we are the recipient of a FEMA grant, and in 2021, we hope to take part of the knowledge from this class and then other things that we have and put it into a digital platform. So stay tuned for that. We do have a certification for a wildfire mitigation specialist. And again, this is just supporting those practitioners out there in the field, helping with residents and communities to make sure they have the correct knowledge and tools they need to make appropriate recommendations when they're working with them. And then to help support all of your efforts, whether you are that resident lead engaging with your neighbors or that practitioner on the ground, or maybe your local government and you see there's a problem in your area and you want to start to address it, we have educational brochures, print ones through our catalog, but we also have digital pieces online that you can download. All of this is free. We have some online videos and learning courses, and some of our resources are available in Spanish as well. So I don't want to take up much more time, but quick, you can go to firewise.org to find all of this. We're also on social media, Twitter and Facebook at Firewise. And any questions or comments, just go to nfpa.org/wildfire-contact, and that'll get directed to the appropriate person. So thank you very much. I look forward to working with Mark and all of you in the future, as if you choose to pursue Firewise as a tool to help your community. And I will now pass it over to, I believe, Jennifer.
Can everyone see my screen? Thank you, Megan. I just wanted to take some time to give an overview of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, IFC's wildland fire programs. We have several. I'm going to focus on the Ready, Set, Go, but we have several other offerings I'd like to make everyone aware of. So just an overview, we have the Ready, Set, Go program. We also have a fire department exchange program, and the IFC has a wildland fire policy committee that provides a lot of leadership, but has also created some useful resources for fire and emergency response organizations. And first, the Ready, Set, Go program is a tool that fire and emergency response agencies can use to engage their community in wildland fire risk reduction. It creates a platform of how to be ready, set, and go before and during a wildland fire. And using that program, we provide different tools and resources that organizations can use to help build understanding in their community and educate people on how they can take action to reduce their risk. I wanted to take a brief moment to overview what each of the tenets of Ready, Set, Go stand for. And Ready is that taking personal responsibility for your property and addressing your individual risk, as well as the organization doing some community level mitigation and taking responsibility for preparing for wildfire. Set is situational awareness, being primed and being aware of fire danger and fire threats. And Go is the evacuation piece in whatever levels or organization that a community implements its evacuation. And to explain what Ready looks like, that's when the Ready, Set, Go organization and partners have created an understanding of the wildland fire history in the area, as well as the risk. Both the response personnel understand the threat and engage residents through different community fuels reduction projects, community level evacuation planning. But then at the individual level, the residents understand their threat and they take action. Some of the pieces that we've already talked about with the home ignition zone, with defensible space and home hardening your home, that's also part of Ready. And then as well as the individuals planning their own evacuation by creating a Go kit and a household plan. Set, as I had mentioned, is that situational awareness, which can be cued by fire danger levels, red flag warnings, and then implementing notification systems as needed. So having all individuals having a system in place to notify your residents, whether it's reverse 911, there's a number of options and different platforms that different communities use, but something is in place and the residents and individuals are signed up for that. And the Go kit that was created at the individual level in Ready is primed and the individual is ready to take that if needed. And GO is the evacuation, and that looks different in every area. Just like fire adaptation, it's dependent on the authority having jurisdiction making the call, and some communities or areas, jurisdictions have levels of evacuation. Some have designations between mandatory and voluntary. It really does look different, but the goal of evacuation is that the community is primed and ready to go. And when they implement evacuation, people leave, and residents are encouraged to go early at whatever level it is to listen to the authority having jurisdiction in the local leaders. And one of the things that we use to kind of create that understanding and prompt the action is the Ready, Set, Go program provides its members materials at no cost. And so there's different options that we have, and many of our members use a multiple amount of our resources. And so the first one is our Wildland Fire Action Guide that is available in English and Spanish. And that's a comprehensive guide of how to be ready, set, and go, with lists and really educating the individuals on some of those key components that we've already talked about with defensible space and home hardening, but also planning for evacuation. We have Go bags, which are blue drawstring bags that kind of prompt people to start planning their Go kit. It may not be able to contain everything that you would need as part of your Go kit, but certainly some important documents and some smaller materials. It really just primes individuals to get ready and create that Go kit. We also have some resources for targeted audience. We have a farmers and ranchers handout for how individuals with those properties can prepare for wildland fire. And we have just reordered, or we've replenished our youth guide stocks, which are for younger audiences, but it does, if you're doing youth outreach, it's a tool that you can use to have a younger audience aware of the threat and bring the material home to start a conversation within their household. And so these are materials, as I said, that are available for free, but we only provide them to our active RSG members. And so I am gonna explain for those of you who are interested on how you can sign up for the Ready, Set, Go program. And it is free. We target primarily fire and emergency response agencies, but we are open to nonprofits, state organizations, conservation districts, and HOAs. We know that different fire and emergency response agencies have different levels of capacity, and so they might need to engage their partners who could also use these materials. So it is free to sign up. I will include the link at the end of this presentation, but you just go to our website and fill out a number of fields so we have a better understanding of your community and your dynamics, and then you can order the materials and report in AMS. And for those of you who are interested in signing up, we do offer implementation trainings on how to get started. Right now, we're doing those virtually, and there's also more information on our website. And I had mentioned that in order to order materials, you need to be an active member. And so that requires you to report in our achievement management system, which here is a screenshot of that. It's a user-friendly system where you essentially report what you were working on, the number of hours and people involved. We try and keep it simple, but it's very valuable information to us. And one of the last things about the Ready, Set, Go program I wanted to make everyone aware of is we have some new opportunities. Through a FEMA Fire Prevention and Safety Grant, we are able to offer some small grants for community chipping programs that will open up in early 2021. We're having a webinar next week on December 10th at noon, and that's free for anybody to register. The information is on our website, which I'll provide at the end. And we are also providing grants in 2021 to support fire and emergency response personnel, to support them using wildfire mitigation training opportunities. A number of our partners, Megan had mentioned the ASIP program, have mitigation training opportunities, and we want to help close some of the funding gaps on being able to utilize those opportunities. So that will also be opening up in 2021, and we'll have more information on that early next year. And just very briefly, I wanted to make everyone aware of some other IFC wildland fire programs. Our fire department exchange, which we call FDX, is exactly what I said, in an exchange between different fire department personnel. We usually have 3 to 5 departments that represent a steering group and are leaders in wildland fire. And we bring in 3 to 5 participant departments. It's typically held in person, and it's a 3-day exchange and covering a variety of topics from codes to we're adding safe and effective response, but as well as fuels reduction, resilient landscapes, community education. And so we're tackling a lot of the fire adapted concepts, but other parts of the cohesive strategy as well. And it really allows the departments to broaden their knowledge base by talking to other departments. They get to consider different options or alternatives or new solutions and really create an action plan to implement change. And so Fire FDX in 2021, we have, through that same FEMA grant that's supporting our shipping grant program, we're able to host some more exchanges. We're looking to later in 2021, just due to trying to adhere to all the safety parameters for COVID-19. And so we'll probably be opening applications in mid 2021 and holding our first exchange later next year. And then the last IFC Wildland Fire program is our Wildland Fire Policy Committee that represents local fire service. And we have representatives on the National Wildlife or National NWCG. And we have a number of department chiefs from across the country. We even have representation from Canada and Australia. And they really provide leadership both to our federal partners, but across different organizations in the fire service as well. And they've developed several resources that are helpful to anyone, and they're free and available. And we have a Community Wildfire Protection Plan Leaders Guide. We have a Wildland Urban Interface Chiefs Guide, and the policy committee is represented in the development of America's Burning WUI, which is still in development, but will be made available as well. And so I just wanted to provide the links, as I mentioned, so a lot of this information with the registration or more information is on our websites. And so it's www.wildlandfirersg.org for the Wildland or the RSG specific information. And then on the IFC's webpage, www.ifc.org/wildland, that's where you can find the policy committee resources that I mentioned, like the WUI Chiefs Guide and the CWPP Leaders Guide. I encourage you to follow us on social media for more updates as we create new opportunities. And you can always email us with any questions at rsg@ifc.org. And like my partners with FACnet and Firewise, I do want to thank our funders. We're funded both through cooperative agreements with the U.S. Forest Service, but also through some DHS FEMA grants.
Great. That was great, Jen and Michelle and Megan. There's just one question asking if you have to, here, let me pull it up, it went away. For Megan, does Firewise contact you each year for a renewal, or do you have to contact them every year to re-up?
So every year there is the annual renewal process done through the portal, and NFPA Firewise program sends out those reminders. So we might mention in an email early in the year what the date's going to be. It's typically in November, but as we approach November, we send out auto notifications from the portal. We do mailers, we do personalized emails to help remind people and guide them through the process.
Great. All right, well, that was it. So I'm going to launch into these new polls, Michelle.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christina. Yeah, so now's the part of our session where we really want to get some feedback from you all on your priorities. So you're going to see on your screen in just a second some more of those polls. So go ahead and navigate with your phone or your computer back to menti.com, and the code again is on your screen. So our first question is, which of these FAC practices do you want to learn more about? And these sort of topics or topic areas are the same ones that were in that inner circle on the graphic that I showed in my presentation. I'll let folks get a chance to answer here. I always think it's really interesting to understand, which parts of that graphic folks are really looking for more information around, and we're going to ask some other questions about how much time you spend on all of these pieces as well. So I see a lot of folks are really working on those core central pieces of that resident and community mitigation, community engagement, working on landscape treatments. We've got less folks working on public health. Or interested in learning about public health. That's actually one of my key areas. I feel like I come from the sort of land management and community engagement background. And so I feel like I know the least about public health. All right, thanks so much for your answers there. These clusters are super helpful. Our next question is a question where you're going to be answering on the scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. So I want to put more effort into the following practice. So you'll move the slider to the right if you strongly agree that you want to put more effort into that kind of work. So go ahead and answer those. And I really appreciate folks participating in this. You know, all the information from your polls is going to go to the organizers of this conference, who are going to be folks who are supporting you all in your fire adaptation journeys. And so this information is really valuable to them to think about what your needs are. So please take this opportunity to weigh in. We've got a lot of folks who want to put more effort into resident and community mitigation. You got inspired by Jack's talk. Hopefully, I know I did. I'm sure everyone else did as well. We've got folks who want to work on that community mitigation piece, who are wanting to work on landscape treatments. You can see these numbers bouncing. We'll give everyone another second to weigh in here. Okay, thanks for weighing in on that. Okay, on to our next question. So if you remember, if you can recall back to that fact graphic, I remember I said it was not comprehensive. So we're really interested in what you didn't see there. What else is it that's important to your relationship with fire, to those questions we asked at the very beginning that wasn't on that graphic? What is critical in your work that you want to share that's missing? Science, yeah, awesome. What else was missing? Anything else that folks noticed that has really been central to you or important to your work that you haven't heard us talk about on this conversation so far? Policy, mentorship, success stories, weather, monitoring, coordination, working with other industry folks, funding, science and policy, getting better engagement, how to get a home assessment, controlled burning, technology transfer, working with rural communities. Awesome. All right, thanks so much. It's always great to understand what some of those key gaps are in the work that we're describing, and really understanding from people like yourselves, what's the most important work that you have going on. So now we're going to ask you a little bit about how you're currently spending your time on fire adaptation. So you're going to be ranking these different sort of topics by the things that you work on from most to least. So your first choice is the thing you work on that you spend the most time working on, and your 8th choice is the thing you spend the least time working on. People are spending time on the landscape. That makes sense to me. Oh, now we have a head. It's matched with the resident and community mitigation and recovery. We've got some recovery folks. Oh, they got beat out again. Awesome, answers are coming in. We'll give a few more seconds. It takes a while to rank all 8 of those things. I think it's really important to think about what we spend our time doing, and to then also sort of extrapolate out from that and say, what do we both spend our time doing, and what's the most important thing to do? I think, again, hearkening back to Jack's presentation, sometimes we spend a lot of time on things that don't necessarily get us the results that we want. And so I think it's really critical to be able to understand where our effort goes, and to understand what the results of that effort are, and to make changes if what you see is not in line with the outcomes that you want. So I really appreciate folks taking the opportunity to kind of do a little bit of reflection as part of this session, and consider your own work and consider your individual relationship with fire and your own role, as well as the relationship you want your community to have with fire. I'm going to pivot here in just a second. We're going to close these polls and we're going to turn to the last part of our session, which is to actually work on hearing a little bit from some of the practitioners who have used the programs that Megan and Jen and I talked about at the beginning of this kickoff. So I am going to invite Chief Jim Morgan from Pine Top, Arizona, and John Riley from Chelan County Fire District 1 in Washington, and Paulette Church from Falls Creek Ranch in Colorado. The three of these folks have been engaged in working with the programs that we described to you, and they're going to share a little bit about their experiences using those programs, and then we'll have a couple of minutes for questions. So we're going to hear from Chief Morgan first, and if you want to pop your video on, Chief Morgan, and your sound, then we'll turn things over to you.
And then Michelle, this is Megan real quick. I just noticed that Paulette is not on, so if you could message her maybe.
Okay, fantastic. I will sort that out.
I'll see how let me get back.
Is Chief Morgan?
I am on. Can you hear
Awesome.
me?
We can hear you. Thanks, Chief. We're turning things over to you to share your experience working with these programs. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Let's see here. Let me start my video. There we go. Well, yeah, this for our organization started about almost 6 years ago. As I took the helm of this organization, I was very inexperienced in dealing with a wildland urban intermix. I came from the Sonoran Desert, so my wildfire history was with that fuel type. One of my elected officials kind of toured me in the area. The Rodeo Chetasky was one of our major fires, not just in our area, but in the state of Arizona, and was really kind of the prompt for wildfire mitigation, I would say, in the state of Arizona. However, I was miffed by the lack of engagement from the community. So as I started to dive in things, one of the first weaknesses that I found started with our wildfire protection plan. It was outdated. 7 years had gone by and it hadn't been revised. And there were a lot of dynamics that changed in our region. So I reached out to the emergency management folks, and we got that document revised and up to date. Quickly, there was a learning curve for me, and I recognized that we had a problem here in the White Mountains, and that was our own culture within the fire service. Not only my agency, but many of the White Mountain fire departments viewed themselves as a structural fire department and not a wildland fire department. Yes, we had folks that were qualified and equally competent for response, but we didn't really see our role in the mitigation or becoming a fire adapted community. So I had to start there and change some of the culture internally. And we did that by partnering with the state of Arizona, our Division of Forestry and Fire Management, and got 20 of our 22 employees qualified to do FireWise assessments. And that was kind of the start of learning all those elements of becoming a fire adapted community. So we additionally sent folks through NFPA's program on structural ignition. We sent about a half dozen of those 22 folks to get some additional training there. And then we've got a couple of folks that are currently working on becoming certified as a mitigation specialist. With that, we started dabbling in developing a fuels crew, folks that could actually do mitigation work, and we applied for our first grant through the state of Arizona, again, the Division of Forestry and Fire Management, and were awarded that initial grant to do some mitigation work, which had been really one of the tenets of our community wildfire protection plan since 2004, but there was really no good work being done in our community. In fact, there was a little over 200,000 identified private acres for treatment, and less than 5% had been treated over the 20-year period, with the majority of that occurring in that first decade through 2006. So very little had been done in terms of engagement on that community wildfire protection plan. It wasn't until I attended a WUI conference that was hosted by Division of Forestry and Fire Management, and that I became aware of the NFPA FireWise program. With that partnership, we began to use a lot of the FireWise programs, and I found out that in our state, we had 65 designated communities, recognized FireWise USA communities, but not a single one was here in the White Mountains. And this was on the heels of the fire in the state of Arizona at the time, the Rodeo Chetasky, only to be surpassed by the Wallow fire that encompassed 2 states. So I thought that was really odd that we lived in an intermix, but we didn't have that community engagement. To touch on that, to give you the change in culture, both organizationally and community, we went from having 0 designated communities to today we have 13, and we have 7 more that we're working with right now for that designation in 2021. The other resource that we use, and a lot of this was done around that same time period, so it was really busy in our early years, and that was working with the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and we were one of the recipients of that fire exchange program that Jennifer Dietz talked about. And that really put us in partnership with some really cool folks that were doing some amazing things in their communities. That included Oregon, Santa Fe, and Austin, Texas, as well as Colorado Springs. The network really launched our mitigation program and continued to grow the work that we were doing here. That connection springboarded a tie-in with the Colorado Collaborations Network, and we were awarded a capacity grant, an AIM grant through that entity that helped again us build our human capital on the ground to do mitigation work. The other thing that the International Association of Fire Chiefs did for us was the CHIPPR program. We were able to develop a CHIPPR program, and we wouldn't have been able to do that unless we had the equipment. And through a generous grant through iChiefs, we were awarded that CHIPPR grant, and it allowed us to do that. And now every year, for the last 3 years, we've been doing CHIPPR programs within a number of our designated FireWise USA designated communities to help their investment and maintain that maintenance work on the initial mitigation programs that have been going on. Lastly, is probably the thing that we've got going on right now, and that's that Ready, Set, Go program. We've been using the Ready, Set, Go program for a number of years. We tied that into a program that we started 5 years ago, and that was we call it a community FireWise block party. It originally started out with our organization, but that program has grown to now it's called the White Mountain Community FireWise Block Party. So we've taken all the tools that many of the folks have mentioned here and put those to actionable items, and it's made a real difference. And our attendance the first year was about 120 residents. The second year, we jumped to over 600 residents. That was also helped by the Cedar Fire. That was a 50,000 acre fire that was right adjacent to our community. And then we've been able to maintain about 325 to 400 residents that attend this FireWise Community Block Party using the NFPA FireWise platform, the Ready, Set, Go platform, and the Fire Adapted Community platform. So that's the other element that I wanted to chat about briefly, and that is we are also what we call an AZFAC member. In fact, I'm one of the steering committees members for that group. And right now, we went from having one hub to 3 hubs, and we've got one in Northern Arizona, Flagstaff, Pine Top, and then in Prescott, Arizona. And that has allowed us to mimic much of the national FACT program in sharing and paying it forward, so to speak, and that we help with the outreach into other communities that are trying to build mitigation, educational outreach, or understanding their risk. So in a nutshell, those are the resources that we have taken advantage of. And the payback that we've received from all of that is to date, we have been awarded over $700,000 in mitigation funds. We've treated roughly about 800 acres, treated over 345 individual properties, many of those being multifamily dwellings. And in terms of the benefit, we have seen for every dollar of treatment, we get about $18 or more in benefit to community risk reduction from wildfire. The grant that we're working on now with iChiefs is developing a Ready, Set, Go guide that's tailored to our community, where we can educate our community on the risk that exists here. And we really want, because we see a lot of transition with folks moving into the White Mountains, and we want them to understand, and we compare the Paradise Fire to our community in terms of risk level. There was a really strong piece that was done that evaluated over 500 communities on wildfire risk. And on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most risk, we're at a 4.61. In Paradise, California, they were at a 0.381, I believe. So we use that comparison to educate communities on the amount of risk that exists in the intermix that we live in. So I think in the years since we started this, all of these tools have been very effective in getting community engagement. And we certainly couldn't do this alone. And our partners include our Navajo County Emergency Management, our local U.S. Forest Service, our Division of Forestry and Fire Management from the state of Arizona, our Arizona Game and Fish. We've got local groups such as our TRACS program, which builds the trail system.
Chief, I hate to interrupt you, but we are a little bit behind. So
okay.
I really appreciate you sharing the amazing work you guys have been up to. And thank you so much again for
you got it. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. All right, we're gonna have John Riley's going to join us now. He works in Washington with Chelan County Fire District 1. And he's going to share a little bit about how he's used these tools to build his program. And as you heard me say, John, we are slightly behind time. So if you can help us be concise, that would be fantastic.
That's perfect, Michelle. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thanks.
Great. Well, I will quote one of my great FireWise community leaders, and I will try and be brief and brilliant and then history in my short presentation here. Thanks, Chief. That was great. You guys are doing a lot of great work out there in Pine Top. Here in Wenatchee, Washington, we're located in the center of the state, and I currently fill the Community Wildfire Liaison position. So I'm a dual position, so part firefighter, part community educator. There's a lot of question about what I do exactly, but it's all centered around the FACT concepts that Michelle shared with you on the FACT diagram. Been in the position for, this is my 5th year now. And when I started as community wildfire liaison, I came from a background of natural resources and firefighting, and I didn't know what to do. And here today, 5 years later, I'm wondering, how do I get it all done? So I wanted to share with you some of my more introductory moments in my career with the fire service. And I really fell hard with FireWise and Ready, Set, Go, and using those resources to not only educate myself, but start as a baseline point for the community members which were coming to the fire district for assistance. In 2015, we had significant loss in our community of residential structures, both commercial warehouses as well, from a wildland fire. And people were beginning to recognize that Central Washington is one of the highest risk areas for wildfire in the country, and Wenatchee, Washington being up in the top 5 in the state. So we leaned on FireWise, we leaned on Ready, Set, Go in introducing our residents to mitigation and preparedness information. And these resources were great because they're starting points. They're generic, they catch a large audience, but it helps you build that relationship with your customers and give them the baseline information to expand upon. And the expansion is really what gets people going. I think it builds a lot of trust when you can tailor a person's specific needs using the FireWise Ready, Set, Go kind of baseline and expand out to, okay, well, in your community, at your home, in your area, like what are the nuances and how do we tackle those? And so using those resources have been hugely beneficial for an entry point. They've also been great for our Latino community. Chelan County is 33% Latino, and the translation of fire mitigation doesn't necessarily amount to an understanding in another language. And so using the Ready, Set, Go and FireWise information as a baseline can help you understand, okay, what's missing? Like what questions does this specific community have? And how can we address those and reach out to other partners? Which builds into this sense of networking. That's very important. I think it's the most important thing in my career. I'm part of the Washington State Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, and it's a group of practitioners similar to FACTNet, but just scaled down to the state level, where we share ideas, successes, failures, ask each other questions, and it's really our peer learning group. There isn't a 4-year degree for fire mitigation, so we have to learn from each other. We have to learn on the job. We have to figure these challenges out, and having a peer group to assist you is just puts you far, far ahead of if you were just spinning your wheels by yourself. So I would challenge everybody listening today who have mitigation projects that they want to take on or challenges that they want to, they see in their community, to build a network yourself. You don't necessarily need a state network, but buy coffee for someone who works in the land trust who has a really detailed understanding of the landscape that you're working in. Go and learn about the ecology. Go and learn about the community and their specific needs and challenges. They may present topics that are not directly related to wildfire mitigation or suppression or recovery, but those challenges will be tied eventually if there's an event. And so understanding your community and networking those challenges is a great way to get out and start your mitigation work in your community. So in a nutshell, build a network, reach out, identify partners that you might not think are direct partners, buy a lot of coffee, and as always, being a network member, I am here to share experiences with anyone listening today. I would be happy to give you information on projects we've completed, things we're looking forward to in the future, and ways that we've gotten this done. So I think that's my 5 minutes, Michelle. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your sharing those experiences, John. We're going to get set up with Paulette Church, who I mentioned is a community leader in Falls Creek Ranch in Colorado. And we're going to hand things over to Paulette. Paulette, I believe you are now joined via phone because you've had some internet trouble, but I think we're getting your slides running here, and we should be able to have you take over in narrating those.
Me undo my mute. Okay.
And just this is Christina Restano. Quickly, just a time check. The senator will be wanting to come on right at noon. So we've got about 11 minutes to wrap up the whole session,
Okay.
Michelle
And then
and Paulette. Thank you.
Paulette, just FYI, if you're signed in on your phone still, maybe sign off because there's an echo happening.
Yeah, I just,
Perfect.
that
Thank
should
you.
take care of it.
Sounds good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Well, Durango, Colorado is not far from Pine Top. So we're down in the Four Corners area. Our homeowners association has 940 acres, and we have 100 1-acre home sites. So that means we have 840 acres of common property. Next, please. Falls Creek Ranch, when I moved here, was the Eeyore of fire mitigation. Don't cut down a tree. Don't take any wood. 1 workday a year. And then we had this huge slash pile that we tried to burn. 1 year, we had to wait 2 years. So people weren't doing anything. Next, please. And so what I want to talk about is how we use the tools you've been learning about to turn into the Tigger of fire mitigation. The 416 fire, because of the work we did, was able to be turned at Falls Creek. Originally, they were going to let it go. And then it would have ended up in town as in Paradise. But they came up and looked, and we were able to make that turnaround. Next, please. So a key part of ours is an annual Fireways education meeting. And I do that as part of Wildfire Preparedness Day. And that little $500 grant buys 1,000 paper bags to put pine needles in. They're the hardest thing to get rid of. And we put them in our air curtain burner to get rid of them. We also always have local Fireways committee members update us. Partners come, our State Forest Service, Wildfire Adapted Partnership, the Durango Fire comes, and we always have an activity. And 1 year we did people using fire extinguishers. It was amazing how many had never done it. And it's so basic. Next, please. So I really want to encourage you to use all these resources because they sort of address in a way, but they overlap beautifully. So the Fireways USA, we use the print materials, videos, webinars, and that's really, I see them more focused on your house and your different zones, all 3 zones. Ready, Set, Go was really helpful for us. That was a new one that I hadn't known about my first few years as an ambassador. But that material to get people ready and then to convince them to leave early is so important. And then the FACT network is just the big picture. And they bring all these partnerships together, neighborhoods together. And we're starting to impact the county zoning now. So we're really excited about that. Next, please. These are some of the materials that I use for Fireways. We had 18 of our properties sell this year. We're a COVID refugee area. And so these guides from Fireways USA on landscape and construction, first thing people start doing is remodeling. And we want them to do it with best practices. And then the handouts are so good because they really put the responsibility on the homeowner. You're taking responsibility, you take control. And their door hangers are really great. And I could use my labeler and put local phone numbers on there. So if they had to evacuate, if they had the numbers they needed, they knew where to go to regroup. And they also had, here's what to do ahead, turn it over, here's what to do as you leave. Next, please. I use graphic videos, some of which are terrifying, but the people needed to see them. And when we had to evacuate for the 416, that gave them the confidence to know they could go either way. Our regular road, which is only one way in, one way out, or our emergency road. So we used a video that was produced here as to our impact. The Your Home Can Survive a Wildfire is excellent to show. And then there's one on fire science where they're showing how the embers hit the house and how little it takes to take a house down. I talk about the person that had everything done right, but they left their broom on their deck. That caught the embers and took their house. Locally produced videos, we have one in Saguache County. If you want to show a video on how to get ready and how to evacuate, The sheriff and their Firewise community did a wonderful job. And then I also show Welcome to Hell, driver escapes Fort McMurray fire. And again, it shows the embers, but it shows people very calmly driving through an area with fire active on both sides of the road. Next, please. Firewise has litter bags, and I use those to give to people as go bags. Also, these, so basically, you know, here's where I'm going to put my stuff. Here's what I'm going to do. Next, please. Next. There we go. So just an example of our volunteers out working on fire breaks, trimming along the roads, and they work in crews. We set up crew chiefs. They recruit their volunteer crews and get their equipment. Next, please. The most important thing is you got to have beer and brats afterwards. We always have, we buy the beer and the brats. People bring all kinds of potlucks, and it's a time to build that community, to celebrate what we've gotten done, to get excited about what's the next project. We now do many days a year of work days, and usually half days, because a lot of our volunteers are in the 60 and 70 age range. Next, please. This is another day we did wildfire preparedness meeting that we do in May. One of our couples here, their son is a helicopter pilot that does firefighting. So he came to our lake and showed people how he does dips, and then 2 different kinds of drops. And at the bottom, that's our little 2-track emergency exit. This development started in 1972. People had never, ever driven down this. So we put reflector signs, made sure it was open, had the sheriff run through it, the fire department run through and okay it. It goes through private lots, so we had to renew our contracts, and we actually had 22 cars go down, which was, people were so thrilled to do that, to know that we really did have another exit. Next, please. In Nevada, this is from the University of Nevada Extension. This Be Ember Aware, if you can get a hold of it, is excellent. And it may be downloadable, but it is so graphic, even though it's not a video, it is an excellent resource. Next, please. The Ready, Set, Go program you've been hearing about. I really like to use the Wildland Fire Action Guide because it hits everything about protecting your home and that kind of information in the hazardous ignition zone. But then at the back, it talks about how to be ready, how to get set, and when to go. And here's your action plan. And people actually fill this out and write in it where we're going to go, where we're going to meet, what we need, care of the pet, what at home, how do we reach the kids, what if school's in session. All of that information can go here and then be copied and handed to the family members, keep in the kid's backpack. Next, please. Next, there we go. And then the Colorado FactNet, this is a really good book that I acquired from them. And of course, as you've heard, they're integrating all the other materials from an FPA and Ready, Set, Go with the neighborhood planning, but they're looking at that bigger picture. Let's see, okay. The government regulations that we're working on. The city of Durango didn't realize they had a WUI, and then all at once after the 416, they figured out they had 400, almost 46 acres. Go ahead, that's fine to go next. And I encourage you to share your story of what you're doing. We had a group from 8 states come in. Our Firewise committee members presented what we're doing, and then they went out and looked at what does this look like? Because we're not done, we're never done, and we always have priorities, but they can see the results of what we've done and how we've worked within this total of 940 acres. Next, please. One of the important things, and I heard it mentioned this morning by Jack, is in others writing grants. I write grants. I write them from my volunteers. What do you need? What do you need? That's always my motivation. And so one of our needs was a dump trailer. This is in our sort yard, and an air curtain burner. And we got them with 2 different grants. The air curtain burner we got used, so it was affordable. And we've been able during this year, We actually got a chipper, a used chipper, a 12-inch Vermeer. And that makes the work so much easier. Now my volunteers don't have to load that dump trailer, haul the slash, and then burn it in the air curtain burner. We just take the chipper to where we've been working and we pull the slash and chip it in place, broadcast it so it's not too thick, and it puts nutrients back in the ground and creates a barrier to hold moisture. Next, please. Training and safety. My husband's in the suspenders there. It's in our home. And we have crew chiefs, and we call them the chainsaw gang. And they come in and do a 3-hour training in have one video using it and so on maintenance. But British Columbia has great work on using wedges. The gentleman on the right is from Spain. He was part of a group that was here and volunteered. On the table there in the other one, you'll see a hat. We found out many of our crew chiefs, they use chainsaws, but they didn't have chaps, and they didn't have a helmet, they didn't have a guard, and they didn't have ear. So we bought the equipment and said, here, take it and use it. Go
So
ahead,
Paulette, we're gonna actually have to cut things off because the senator has joined us. But thank you so much for sharing the work that you've
Sure.
done. Again, I'm gonna pass things over to Mark Titus, who's gonna introduce the senator. And thank you again for sharing your experiences and work.
Thank you. Excellent program today.
I can't seem to get my video going, but
And
So we're
I'll
bi-
just say, I don't think she's here quite yet, Mark.
copy
So-
that. Copy that.
So I think that we'll just wait, and maybe we could ask a question or two, if that sounds okay, Michelle.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay. We have one that says, what role do these programs and others like them have in building trust between organizations and communities and motivating direct action?
I mean, I would say from a network perspective, that's sort of the center of what we try to do. We try to build strong relationships among partners and help encourage network members to really think about their relationships with folks who work like directly as their jobs on fire issues, as well as folks throughout the community, maybe with your local hospital or with your school district, you know, thinking about all of the aspects of your community and how their relationship with fire what actions they could take to improve your relationship with fire.
Great.